All right, guys. Thank you for having me. Rabbi Bob asked me to come and give the shiur tonight, and Baruch Hashem, it's a cover for me. It's a cover for everyone here, and hopefully it should be something that is elevating and illuminating. And Baruch Hashem, we are zocha oftentimes in the Chabura to have Gemara shiurim and to have shiurim that are filled with lumdis and things like that. But every so often, I think it's a very good thing to take stock and have a parsha shiur.
Yeah, like once a year.
Every so often. So tonight's that parsha shiur. Hopefully we can have more. If people are interested, we can get something going also. But so tonight's on the parsha. So we have Beha'alotecha at Menorah. So the first Rashi on the parsha deals with something that is absolutely mind-boggling, and I want to take you on a journey. We'll explore it, understand it, go weiter, and hopefully come home with something that we can actually use to Beha'alotecha at our own Menorah. So the Rashi says, Lama nismacha parsha ha-Menorah to parsha ha-Nesiim. And as we know from last week's parsha Naso, we had all of the different gifts that were offered by each one of the different tribes. All the different groups came and they gave the same exact offering. They gave the same exact korban essentially to Kodesh Baruch Hu. And we know that's the biggest parsha in all of the Chumash. So we know it's deeply significant. But there's just one problem. Somebody's missing. The Levim are completely missing. The Levim didn't offer anything. And so Rashi comes in to answer, how is it that we have the Menorah juxtaposed to what happened with the Nesiim by bringing in this Medrash in Medrash Tanchuma, which says, Aaron HaKohen, who was Chalash Dato, and he said, I'm distraught over the fact that my people weren't included in the inauguration. I wanted to be included. So Kodesh Baruch Hu says, and I quote, I just want to get the lashon exactly right here. Don't worry, by your life, your role is greater than theirs, because you madlik and meitiv et haneiro. You light and prepare, or make the candles good, the menorah. So let's just understand Rashi, what happened here. We want to understand why it is that the Nesiim first were mentioned, and then we're juxtaposing them at the end to the beginning of the parsha over here with the Menorah. We have a Medrash coming in to answer that by supposedly saying, don't worry, Aaron was a little upset. We should have a question and be very bothered by this answer with Rashi. It should be thoroughly unsatisfying to us. Now, clearly that means that we don't understand Rashi yet. So the Ramban actually jumps all over this. He says, what are you talking about? And he has many different arguments he posits. It's a big, long Ramban, but there's two pieces that I like to focus on as we go through it. And so, just for a second, I want you to imagine right now that you're 6 or 7 years old. And this is going to be a mashal that I'm going to use, and forgive me, Aaron HaKohen is on an exalted, lofty level. He is tremendously big, and I'm going to bring this down to a level where we are younger, where we are in a different place. And so this is not a taina on Aaron in any way. This is an attempted mashal for us to appreciate where we're holding here. Imagine for a second you're 6 years old, and everybody at the camp that you're at is getting an ice pop. And you see the box, and you getting an ice pop, and you're getting an ice pop, and he's getting an ice pop. Everybody gets an ice pop, and you're like, there's still ice pops left in the box. Well, why don't I get an ice pop? Why don't I get the ice pop? Okay. And the next thing you know, your counselor taps you on the shoulder, or your father taps you on the shoulder, and he's like, don't worry, guys. Or don't worry. I know you wanted an ice pop, but you're going to get an ice cream sandwich. Okay. Who's to say that ice cream sandwich is better than the ice pop, number one? First question the Rabban's going to ask. Who's to say that that's better than the ice pop, number one? Number two is, he wanted the ice pop. Who cares if it's better? He said, I wanted to be a part of this. Let's bring in Aaron again. Aaron's going to say, I wanted to be a part of this inauguration. Not a different one. Not some other nicety mitzvah. And also, who's to say that, that's better, the menorah of all things? So the Ramban has multiple things that he says. But the first one is he's going to ask why the mitzvah of the menorah would be better than the Ketorah. It seems like it's a pretty solid mitzvah over there, still connected. Why the menorah? And not only that, he challenges by saying, Aaron had an opportunity to do all this stuff. They had the days of the Miluim. They had 7 days of prep work over here, and he was the one totally involved in everything. So, Rashi, your understanding of this medrash seems to be very, very, very far off of where we need to be. So the Ramban essentially is going to say, I don't like your understanding of that medrash. I'm going to learn up the reason for why we have the menorah juxtaposed with the inauguration differently. That's for different shiur. It's for a different time. But what I want to focus on is the Ramban's understanding of our medrash, and help that develop further where we're holding, and have that get to a place where we'll have seder, hopefully. Now, the Ramban is upset, and he says, no, I'm going to interpret this medrash in Tanchuma differently. I read it as follows. Aaron Cohen did have distraught feelings about not being included, but Hashem didn't say, I'm giving you the menorah in the Mishkan. He said, in your merit, at the time of the Chashmonayim, at the time of Hanukkah, in your merit, you and your people will rededicate and re-inaugurate the temple. Whoa, amazing. So we have something that's sizable, something that's palpable, something that's like unreal. At the time of the Chashmonayim, you're going to be the one who is, in your zechut, the savior, the saving of the Jewish people is going to come about. Like, amazing. We could have all totally fallen off the planet, in a sense. We could have been wiped out completely by the Greeks. And yet, in your merit, our own, and yet we still should feel a little like, I don't know. I'm still not loving the Ramban either. So now we have an understanding of how we can have an inauguration. We're at least in the zone. We're in the drop zone. We aren't talking about just a random mitzvah that's going to somehow be connected to the inauguration. But there's two flaws that I at least see, or at least two inconsistencies, two things that I'm not so thrilled with when it comes to the Ramban's understanding. Number one, we are very, very, very far off of Pshuto Shel Mikra. We are talking not about like the straight line text here. We are like very far into the realm of, it's the Hanukkah time and it's going to be that minute. Okay, number one. And number two, we're 1,000 some odd years ahead of time. We're 1,000 years post when we're supposed to be. So we still have our kasha. We still have our question. Let's remember what our question originally was for those who just came into the room. We're saying Lama Nismach Parshas HaMenorah, the parsha of the Nesiim. We brought in a medrash that explains supposedly how that was going to tie things together with Aaron being upset and getting the menorah as a zechut or some sort of merit for it. So we brought in that. We have a Ramban. Now, Rav Moshe Shapiro is going to raise the same questions that I essentially did, and enter Rav Moshe Shapiro. He's going to tell us neither of what we've seen so far is what we're really trying to grasp onto. We need to find this inauguration right now, and we need to find something that's not only currently happening, but we need to find something that's going to be even better. Aaron had to have somehow taken part in this inauguration. He needed to somehow get this mitzvah and have this be better. It had to be an ice pop, not the ice cream sandwich, right? As the Moshe goes. And so we now have Rav Moshe saying, this is the framework for what we need. Who's going to enter? The Rashbam. The Rashbam gives us exactly what we're looking for, but we have to open our minds a little bit to explain it, and I'll try to unpack it. So again, it must be that somehow this particular menorah in this particular Mishkan was directly related to this particular inauguration. And it was actually greater than what the Nesiim did. That's how we have to get our answer. So here's what the Rashbam says in Beha'alotecha 8:2. Since, quote unquote, since this is a constant work, the Torah mentions it here. Although all the work of the Mishkan was completed, the lighting of the menorah was not completed because it is constant. I'm going to repeat it again. Since this is a constant work, the Torah mentions it here, meaning the avot of the menorah. Although all the work of the Mishkan was completed, the lighting of the menorah was not completed because it is constant. What in the world does that mean? So Moshe Shapiro opens it up for us to get a better panoramic view of what's flying. In other words, the menorah is completed each time that it's lit. Think about it. We think a menorah is a menorah. They're saying, the Rashbam, Rav Moshe Shapiro based on the Rashbam, the menorah isn't a quote-unquote menorah until it's lit. It's not complete. It's just there. And we don't see that by any other thing, any other of the Kalim in the Mishkan. Everything else was made, And it was muchan, it was prepared. That's it. It was ready to go. How? Well, let's take a look at it. You have the shulchan that you built the thing on. Okay, I put on top of it, whatever I'm going to offer. But the shulchan is there. But for whatever reason, spiritually, this menorah had like an extra level of, it ain't the menorah until it actually was lit. And so this answers our Ramban issue of, wait a second, why couldn't it be anything else? Why couldn't it be the Ketorah? No, because the Mizbeach for the Ketorah was already done. It was already put together. It was already there. It was already muchan. So the only time we can have right now is, this just feels weird to us, because we look at the menorah differently than the way Rav Moshe Shapiro looked at it. I love questions. I'll take them after this year for sure. Hold on to them, let me know, and we'll keep going weiter. But I love questions. We'll do it at the end. Big thing here. Who's to say, though, that that's actually the way it was? Well, we're going to take on faith for now. That's the Rashbam, Rav Moshe Shapiro, way bigger than us. So, for the purpose of this year, let's just take at face value that the menorah itself wasn't officially the menorah. It wasn't completed. It was a menorah, but it wasn't completed enough to be completed until the Nero were lit. So now this should give us a fertile ground for an answer. Why? Because essentially what's going to happen is, we're going to see that in order for everything to have been inaugurated, it had to have been completed. The inauguration couldn't have fully happened yet until you had everything ready and muchan and prepared. So, in a certain sense, the menorah itself isn't ready. It's not there until all the neiros are lit. So what's happening? Ironically, it's the final part of the very inauguration that Aaron was so distraught about missing that he didn't miss. He's included. He's right there. Because he has to be the one to finish the menorah. And without it, the whole inauguration isn't done. Another layer. But wait a second. If it's a constant mitzvah, this inauguration is happening over and over again. Well, yeah, it is. It's exactly right. As we know, the Ramchal talks about this in Derech Hashem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu renews the world every single day. There's a re-inauguration of the entire physical Bria every day. Aaron HaKohen was zocha to the same thing that was mirrored in the Mishkan. And we know that the Mishkan was a parallel of what's going on up there, down here. Aaron HaKohen got to light those lights every single day. He partnered with HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a way that the Nesiim never could. And it's in that way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, this is your extra, better ice pop, whatever, for the purpose of the analogy. So we have essentially Aaron HaKohen getting to partner with God, renew the entire world by lighting the menorah every single day. And so why does Aaron not lose out? Because, as we now see, his act was the very completion of the inauguration that he thought he missed out on, that he didn't. And it was greater because not the Nesiim got to partner with the Kadosh Baruch Hu in any way. They brought some korbanot. That's great. That's awesome. They brought all these bowls. Fine. But nobody was able to renew, so to speak, the world, like lighting the illumination of the menorah. We still should have some questions, by the way. We'll take them after. We're going to keep going later. There should still be some inconsistencies. Other people challenge this, yeah?
That should be the end of it. There's the question time now.
Oh, so like this. So, in a certain sense, I think we could do that. If you guys have questions, let's do that, and we'll move on to the next piece. Yeah.
I don't know. Say it.
Oh, fine. Oh, so the way I see this, I'm fine with it. I think this is very Seder oriented. You have a situation now where you have the menorah, which is already mystical in a certain sense, not being allowed to be completed because it's a quasi-physical spiritual entity until it's actually lit. Plus the renewal of it, paralleling the physical spirit. I'm good here. Everybody else? All right. So then let's go weiter and understand what it is that this menorah is and what's so special about it. So let's now move on to a word choice that we see in the parsha. And anybody who's doing Mishnah Yomi will have already seen this in Yoma a couple of times. The Kohen Gadol, his responsibility is to lahadlik et hanerot, and also to make them good. Laheitiv et hanerot. It's not just to light them; it's to make them good. What does that mean? We know the classic understanding is laheitiv et hanerot. It's just I'm cleaning out the menorah and I'm going to go reset it up again. But what does it mean? Al pi pshat. Well, like the simplicity of the words. It's to make the candles good. How do you make the candles good? And we also know, says the Malbim in Ramazei Mishkan, that every one of the kelim in the Mishkan corresponded directly to something that we should have inside of ourselves, because v'asuli mikdash v'shechanti b'tocham. It should be that we ourselves are making ourselves into a Mishkan so that God can dwell in us or among us. How do we do that? Says the Malbim, by putting these traits inside ourselves, by putting these symbols inside of ourselves, by putting these opportunities, these character traits, whatever you want to call them, of these kelim in us. So that means we all should have a shulchan, we all should have an aron, we should all have a menorah and everything else. So, how do we make ourselves more menorah-like? How do we make ourselves more menorah-like? Well, we also have to lahadlik and lametiv our own nera. How do we do that? So let's first learn how an actual ner works. What is a ner? In order to know what we need to be like, we need to know what that is. You first have a fuel source, the oil. The oil. After that, you have a wick. And then you have the flame. If you don't have a good fuel source, you won't even get off the ground. You can't just plop your candle in whatever you feel like it. It's not even going to go anywhere. And if your wick is impure, if it's not a solidly put together, balanced wick, you're lacking. And it's lacking. And if you don't have the flame, it's not going to illuminate. It's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to achieve its ultimate purpose of illuminating. So too with us. What's our fuel source? Torah, mitzvahs, avodas Hashem, gimulas chasadim, like doing good things. That is being steeped within the whole of Jewish tradition is our fuel source. What's our wick? Our good character that we have. And a bad wick will sputter. You could see when you could also see sometimes when a person with bad midos sputters. And we ourselves have to make sure that we don't sputter. We have to go out of our way to work on that, so that way we can actually be set ablaze in light. That is what it is to be a good wick. Working on your midos, working on your character, and not just through the Gemara that you learn, but actively bringing that out into the world as well. And then lastly, you have to have a good flame. If we just learn Torah on our own, for our own purposes, and we do mitzvahs, but we're not impacting the world at large, that's nice. But that's not being a menorah, which is required to be inside of us. And if you look at great Gedolim, who even were the type of like Rav Chaim Kanievsky, who was the type that learned and learned and learned, he still had people coming to his door, asking and answering, right? He was there all the time for Klal Yisrael. Every Gadol B'Yisrael is there. He doesn't become a Gadol because he just learned and didn't share. The light is what illuminates, Me'or. Yeah? The whole illumination process is what helps us become that menorah. And ironically, the flame is exactly what we said earlier must exist or the menorah doesn't. So now let's understand the structure of the menorah itself to better get us to appreciate the structure of who we should be and what we should be doing inside of us. Okay, so we're dealing with the lighting of the menorah, or the light itself. What about the structure? So the Gemara in Bava Batra 25b tells us exactly what the menorah symbolizes and what it stands for. It represents Torah wisdom. And so my Rebbe, so some of you may know in this room, Rav Emanuel Bernstein, but also Rabbi Orlowick and others, say the following idea about what it is that we can understand about the structure of the menorah to get us to where we need to be a better menorah. And we know that, and we learn it by three particular adornments that were on the menorah. The menorah had cups, it had globes or spheres, and it had flowers. So what are cups? Cups are good receivers. You can put a lot of things into it. A sphere holds something, and it doesn't let it go. It's in there forever. And a flower is what blossoms forth organically from something. This teaches us how to learn Torah. This teaches us how to be B'nai Torah, B'nai Aliyah, going up, Beha'alotecha. It teaches us that we need to recognize that we have to put a lot of Torah inside ourselves. We have to be a cup, a good receiver. It has to be able to hold a whole lot of Torah. And then, what's our sphere? Chazara. Chazara, chazara, chazara. You know this. The more you do chazara, the more you understand this for life. And the more chazara you do, the more you're going to internalize and make that Torah part of you. And lastly, and only lastly, flowers are your chidushim that you can bring forth. Woe to the person who tries to say a chiddush without actually learning enough Torah or doing enough chazara. That's not a flower. I don't know what it is, but that's not a flower. So you have to make sure that you have all three of those. And once you do, you're on a plane, in a place now, where in your own, bless you, in your own personalistic mikdash, you can have menorah. Chazara. We talked about our neiros. We have to have a good source, a good wick, and a good flame. We also have to have cups, globes, or spheres, and flowers. If we don't have those, we aren't the menorah as we're supposed to be. And the menorah, we know that the menorah is Torah wisdom, illumination. We need to do that. So let's ascend a little higher, pun intended. The word that we usually use for lighting the menorah is lahadlik at the Menorah. But our parsha uses the language of ascension. It says Beha'alotecha at the Menorah. It's not dealing with lighting, but actually an aliyah, a going up. A going up. And the classic answer for why this is, Rashi tells us, is that you have to hold the fire to the wick until the flame of the ner rises on its own. And the act of rising is how the ner is created, and therefore the Torah uses language of that. Also, he then says what one might say about the shiur, but you can't say that by Rashi, but it's very practical. There was a step in front of the menorah, he literally physically went up. Okay, but there's something deeper afoot over here. And so, in the immortal words of my Rabbi, Rabbi Emanuel Bernstein, he says, as we raise the lights of a sugya, we should also be raising ourselves. As we raise the lights of a sugya, we should also be raising ourselves. How do we do that? Meaning, the very reason that the word choice of going up is used is to discuss the avoda of the vessel that symbolizes Torah wisdom. So we ourselves have to rise up and truly acquire the Torah and truly get to it. We can't just learn Torah. We have to live Torah. What's it mean to live Torah? No, I don't mean the 613 mitzvahs. Yes, that's absolutely vital. Yes, you need to do that, and that's crucial. But that's not what I'm talking about by living Torah. I'm not talking about learning so that I can then do mitzvahs. That's baseline. That's not yet totally living a Torah life. Living Torah is when you live life in such a way where every aspect of our lives is impacted by the Torah that we learn. It's infused in your kishkis. It's who you are. So let's talk about two different situations or stories or vignettes to understand living Torah a bit more. Rav Shach, the great Panovich Rosh Yeshiva, he went grocery shopping on his own. Rav Shach went to the grocery store. Of all, really? You think Rav Shach wanted to go to the grocery store? He's going to be involved. He's there. And so invariably, people would, they would ask the great Rosh Yeshiva when he's in line, hey, Rebbe, go in front of me, go in front of me, go in front of me. And he turned it down every single time. There was one person who had I don't know if it's chutzpah or just the curiosity, to ask Rav Shach one time, Rebbe, why don't you at least go in front of a katan? A minor, a little kid. You are the gadol hadur. You are so chashuv. Your time is, priceless. You have klal on your shoulders. Why don't you just go in front of the katan? To which Rav Shach looked with just complete, are you joking? How could I do that? There's no way I could do that. Why? He says, the Gemara in the Halacha tells us that a katan is incapable of giving mechila. And if you learn the sugyas of mechila properly, you'll know that that's exactly right. He brought, not the physical shas, don't go bringing shas with you to the grocery store, no BTDs over here, but he brought shas with him everywhere he went. Everywhere he went, it was on his mind. He applied it directly into the world that he saw. That's living Torah. That's what we have to do. These are very high level. But this is Beha'alotecha, so let's rise a little bit. Let's see what we're trying to get to. Let's see what we're trying to do and what we should strive for. Another one. The Talmud in the Gemara Yerushalmi in Sota 1:4 talks about a woman who used to go to Rabbi Meir's shiur. She loved going to Rabbi Meir's shiur. Her husband did not like this so much. One night she got home very late from Rabbi Meir's shiur. And the husband says to her, this is the Gemara. Gemara in Sota Yerushalmi. Says, if you don't stop going to the shiur, it's over. I'm leaving. So, but he says it differently than that. He says, the next time you go to the shiur, don't come back in my house until you have spat in Rabbi Meir's eye. Look it up.
I've heard it before.
Don't come back home unless you've spat in Rabbi Meir's eye. It's like, what? Okay. So, word got back to Rabbi Meir that this is happening, that this happened. So, somehow, in some way, whether she goes this year or not, I don't know, Rabbi Meir finds her and says to her, I have a terrible eye condition. I'm just really, really, really in need of somebody spitting in my eye. It got out, and she's like, really? Like that's perfect. But you're Rabbi Meir. She's like, no. It would really feel a lot better if you spat in my eye. So she does. Now I don't know how that Shalom bias went when she got home back in the house, but she got back in the house. So the Talmidim are up in arms. What are you doing? What do you mean? You're gonna let somebody spit in your eye? And says, what are you talking about? I learned that from the Parsha Nasa. What happens with the Sota, with the water? You have to write a Kadosh Baruch Hu's name right on it, and you erase it. You erase the Hashem's name, the honor of Hashem. So what does Rabbi Meir says? He says, if a Kadosh Baruch Hu's honor could be erased, why not Meir's? That's living Torah. The highest of the heights of living Torah. Of when you have seen something inside of what you're learning, you've applied it to yourself. That is how we make the menorah in our own Mishkan. That's how we become better people. And that's how we don't just learn Torah, but we live it. And it's important to have a Seder. But it's important for you to also not just go through the Torah, but to have it go through you too. So let's just do some chazar over what we said tonight, and then I'd happily take questions. I hope I'm on level to be able to answer them. But so let's just take stock of what we said so far. We posed the famous question of why the Parsha of the Menorah is juxtaposed to the Parsha of the Nesiim. We saw Rashi's answer, the Ramban's attack, and his understanding of the Medrash that he brought. We noted two difficulties in the Ramban's answer. First, that one, inauguration doesn't seem to have much to do with another. And second, it deviates substantially from Pshuta Shel Mikra. We suggested a resolution based on Ramosha Shapiro's understanding of the Rashbam, and how the menorah wasn't completed until it was lit. Therefore, it was Aaron who not only was directly involved in the inauguration of the Mishkan, but the one who merited to complete it. We then mentioned the Malbim in Ramazeh Mishkan, who reveals that we all must make ourselves into a Mishkan, into a Mikdash, by putting the ideals that the vessels of the Mishkan represented into ourselves. We noted what making Neirot good meant for the menorah and for ourselves. We then discussed cups, spheres, and flowers, and how they are actually a part of who we are. You have to make sure that you're a proper receiver of Torah, that you chazer a ton, and that you're brave enough to say a Kiddush when you know that you should. You have to let your light illuminate. Be brave. Finally, we expounded and explained what Beha'alotecha and Neirot entail. And we plumbed the depths of really what it means to live Torah. So when you hear the word B'nai Aliyah, when people call us as Baalei Tshuva, I think we're all Baalei Tshuva in the room, who call us B'nai Aliyah, it should mean something deeper to you. It should mean something different now. You're a Ben Aliyah. You're a son of ascension. You're a son of somebody going up. And it should be that we're able to do this. And so we should be zocheh to raise the lights of our personalistic menorah, shine brightly for others, and truly live a Torah life. Good Shabbos, guys. Like Shilas, I'm ready for any Shilas in my head.
Is the Ramban presented as having a kasha on Rashi?
Yeah, very good, very good. So the Ramban presents. It's one of the biggest Rambans you'll see as Rambans go, and he's raising the kasha on Rashi, saying, "I don't like your understanding of the Medrash. It's not that I don't like that it's Smichas Parshas. Like he says that's fine. He has a whole different reasoning and rationale. He's going to talk about these things, but the answer really is essentially." I don't like your understanding of the Medrash. I'm going to bring in my own, and that ends up being his argument. His Maklok is re-understanding, reinterpreting the Medrash as saying, it's about Hanukkah, the Cheshmonayim, and the inauguration there.
Okay, so I thought this was going in a different direction. We're in no way trying to reconcile Rashi and the Ramban, right?
No, in a certain sense, I'm brought the Rashbam for the purposes of like defending Rashi and letting the Ramban's understanding of how the Smichas Parshas work is different. That's a much bigger animal. We use the Rashbam to answer up how the Medrash works in favor of what Rashi's saying, and therefore resolving the taina that the Ramban had to begin with on that Medrash. If that Medrash works, then we actually have an answer and a resolution to Smichas Parshas. Why? Because if Aaron really was Chalish Data over this entire situation, and if it really was a problem, then the Eibusher had to give him something. And why is there a connection between last week's parsha and this week's parsha, the Rosh Hashanah of Moshe Shapiro? Is that it was the next part of the inauguration. It dovetailed perfectly right into it. And once you have that symmetry lining up, then you have your Smichas Parshas. Cool? Baruch Hashem. All right, guys. Good Shabbos.